The entire ballroom erupted in applause as my brother Kenji slipped a massive diamond ring onto his fiancée's finger. Her father, the esteemed CEO of a national logistics firm, beamed with pride, patting Kenji on the back like he was his own son. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne, and the air buzzed with the chatter of the city's elite. They were all celebrating the union of two powerful families, two bright futures. They had absolutely no idea that I was standing in the back, near the service entrance, holding a simple USB drive that would burn their perfect gilded world to the ground. In my hand, I held the truth. They were toasting a future built on a foundation of lies and funded by the life he had systematically stolen from me. The man they knew as Kai Ito, the charming entrepreneur with a mysterious but clearly affluent background, was a complete fabrication. His real name was Kenji Tanaka, and his only startup capital had been my life's savings and a mountain of debt he had shackled to my name before vanishing without a trace 5 years ago. He stood there, soaking in the adoration, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, a car I had to sell to pay the first interest payment on his loan. You're probably wondering why I would wait 5 years, why I would choose this specific moment, his engagement party, to detonate his life. Why not just sue him or confront him privately? Because private justice wasn't enough. The humiliation had to be as public as the praise he was currently enjoying. He didn't just take my money, he took my name, my youth, and my trust in family. To understand why I needed to watch the light die in his eyes in front of everyone he had ever fooled, you need to understand the hell he and my parents put me through. It all started with a simple, poisonous phrase, "But he's your brother." From as far back as I can remember, our family had an unspoken rule. Kenji was the sun, and I was the planet that silently orbited him, tasked with keeping things in order. Kenji was born with a charisma that charmed everyone, especially our parents. He was the dreamer, the creative one, the golden child who could do no wrong. When he scraped his knee, my mother would rush over in a panic. When he got a B on a test, my father would praise his artistic temperament that couldn't be confined by rigid academics. He was showered with gifts, praise, and endless second chances. His failures were never his fault. They were learning experiences or the fault of a world that just didn't understand his genius yet. I, on the other hand, was the responsible one. This was not a compliment. It was a life sentence. My achievements were not celebrated. They were expected. Straight A's earned a simple nod. My first job, a quiet, "that's good." My role was to be stable, predictable, and invisible. More importantly, my role was to be Kenji's safety net. When he was 16 and crashed our dad's car joyriding with friends, my parents' first concern was whether Kenji was traumatized. I was the one who got lectured for not being a better influence and stopping him. I was the one who had to work a summer job to help pay for the repairs because it was a family responsibility. My earnings went into fixing his mistake, while his allowance continued uninterrupted. This dynamic only intensified as we grew older. I went to a local university, got a degree in accounting, and landed a stable job at a mid-sized firm. I was meticulous with my money, packing my own lunch and saving every spare yen, slowly building a fund for a small apartment of my own. Kenji, meanwhile, drifted through life. He dropped out of college to pursue a series of brilliant business ventures, importing artisan phone cases from China, starting a high-end dog-walking service, trying to become a day trader. Each one ended in failure, and each time our parents would swoop in to pay off his debts and praise him for his courage to take risks. They saw his recklessness as ambition and my stability as a lack of it. Then came the big one, the idea that was finally going to make him a millionaire. He called it Visionary Vistas, a bespoke travel agency for immersive cultural experiences. It sounded just as flimsy as all the others. But this time, he said, he needed real capital. He needed a business loan. And that's when my parents turned their full, united attention to me. The bank, of course, turned Kenji down flat. With his credit history of unpaid bills and defaulted small loans, they wouldn't give him a yen without a guarantor, a stable, reliable guarantor with a clean record and verifiable assets. All eyes in the family turned to me. That evening, my parents invited me over for dinner. It wasn't a request, it was a summons. Kenji was there, and he launched into a passionate, wild-eyed presentation, waving his hands around as he described luxury tours and exclusive access to cultural sites. He had a binder full of blurry pictures, printed from the internet, and spreadsheets with financial projections that a child could see were pure fantasy. When he finished, my father looked at me, his expression stern. "Well, Akio, the bank needs a guarantor. It's time for you to step up." I took a deep breath. "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I'm sorry, Kenji, but I can't. The business plan has no substance. The numbers don't account for a dozen different expenses. It's too much of a risk, and I've been working hard to save for my own future." The silence that followed was heavy and cold. My mother was the first to break it, her voice trembling with manufactured disappointment. "Your future? What about your brother's future? Akio, how can you be so cold? We are a family. Family helps family." Kenji just stared at his plate, putting on a masterful performance of a wounded artist whose dreams were just crushed. "It's fine, Mom," he mumbled. I should have known. Akio was always the jealous type. That was the opening shot in what became a week-long psychological war. They called me every day. My mother would cry on the phone, telling me I was tearing the family apart and breaking her heart. My father would send terse messages about duty and honor. They accused me of being selfish, of wanting to see my brother fail. They framed my prudence as cruelty. "It's just a signature, Akio," my father said during one particularly nasty call. "Why is your little box of an apartment more important than your brother's dream?" I asked them why they didn't use their own house, their own savings, as collateral if they believed in him so much. The excuses were immediate and insulting. They were nearing retirement. They couldn't risk it. But my future, mine was apparently disposable. They weren't asking me to share the risk. They were ordering me to take all of it. The final assault happened on a Friday. My parents and Kenji showed up at my tiny apartment unannounced. I was tired after a long week at work, and I had no energy left to fight. They didn't shout. It was worse. They sat on my small sofa, a united tribunal, and spoke in low, disappointed tones. My mother held a handkerchief and dabbed at her dry eyes. My father stared at the floor, shaking his head slowly as if I were the greatest disappointment of his life. Kenji, for his part, delivered the masterstroke. He knelt on the floor in front of me, a gesture so dramatic and out of character that it stunned me into silence. He took my hands. They felt clammy. "Akio," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know I haven't been the best brother. I've made mistakes. But this is different. I swear to you on my life, I will not let you down. I will make every single payment. I will succeed. And the first thing I do when I make it big is pay you back double and buy you any apartment you want. Please, just give me this one chance to prove myself to you. To prove myself to everyone." My parents nodded in unison. "He means it, Akio," my mother whispered. "He's a changed man." I looked at their faces, a perfect tableau of hope and expectation directed entirely at me. I knew it was a lie. Deep in my gut, every rational part of my brain screamed that it was an act. But I was so tired. I was tired of being the villain. the cold-hearted monster standing in the way of my family's happiness. For a fleeting, foolish moment, a part of me wanted to believe him. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this one sacrifice would finally earn me a real place in my own family. The thought of continued resistance, of more phone calls, more tears, more accusations, was unbearable. I wanted it to be over. So I broke. "Fine," I said. The word felt like dust in my mouth. "I'll do it." The change was instantaneous. The gloom evaporated. My mother's tears vanished, and she hugged me tightly. My father clapped me on the shoulder, a broad smile on his face. "Attaboy! I knew you were a good son." Kenji leaped up, a triumphant glint in his eyes that he couldn't quite hide. A few days later, we were at the bank. I signed the documents, the pen feeling like a block of ice in my hand. The loan amount was astronomical. $50,000. It was more than 2 years of my gross salary. As the bank manager stamped the papers, my family was already planning a celebration dinner. They didn't see the chains I had just willingly locked around my own ankles. They only saw Kenji's bright, shining future. For about a month, the lie held. Kenji would send me vague but optimistic emails about securing partnerships and finalizing itineraries. He even made the first payment on the loan, and my parents were insufferably smug about it. "See, Akio?" my mother would say over the phone. All he needed was for his own brother to believe in him. I allowed a tiny, foolish part of myself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Then, the second payment was due. I received an automated alert from the bank. Payment overdue. Annoyance, not panic, was my first reaction. Classic Kenji. I paid it myself to protect my credit score, assuming I'd have to lecture him about responsibility later. I called his phone. It went straight to a generic voicemail message. I texted him. No reply. Days turned into a week. I emailed him. The emails bounced back. Address not found. A cold knot of dread began to form in my stomach. I drove to the cheap apartment he was renting. The door was answered by a new family. The landlord informed me that Kenji had paid his last month's rent in cash and moved out 3 weeks prior, leaving no forwarding address. He was gone. The knot in my stomach turned to ice. He hadn't just been late with the payment. He had planned this. He had waited just long enough for the loan to clear, and then vanished. I raced to my parents' house, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I burst in, holding the overdue notice like a piece of evidence. "He's gone!" I yelled, my voice cracking. "Kenji's gone. He took the money and disappeared." I expected shock, anger, worry. What I got was far worse. My father stared at me, his face hardening into a defensive mask. "Don't be so dramatic, Akio. He's probably just on a business trip and can't get a signal." "His apartment is empty. His number is disconnected," I pleaded, desperation rising in my throat. My mother crossed her arms. "Well, what did you do?" she asked, her voice sharp and accusatory. "Did you pressure him? You know how sensitive he is. You probably scared him off with all your negativity." The floor fell out from under me. They weren't concerned. They were building a wall, and they were putting me on the other side of it. I looked at them, my own parents, and I saw strangers. "This is a $50,000 loan," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "What am I going to do?" My father sighed, a sound of pure annoyance. "That's your responsibility now, isn't it? You're the guarantor. We have our retirement to think about. You're a resourceful young man. You'll figure it out." And with that, he turned his back on me and walked into the other room. My mother followed him without a backward glance. They had fed me to the wolves to protect their golden child, and now they were leaving me to be devoured. The life I had known ended. My existence was now governed by a single brutal equation: the balance of the loan. My salary, once a source of modest pride, was a cruel joke against the monthly payments demanded by the bank. After rent and basic utilities, I was already in the red. The first thing to go was my car. I sold it for less than it was worth because I needed the cash immediately. The money vanished in 2 loan payments. My small apartment, the one I was once saving to buy, was next. I broke my lease, paid the penalty, and moved into a single mold-spotted room in a rundown boarding house with a shared bathroom at the end of the hall. My world shrank to the size of that room and the path to my jobs. Plural. My 9-to-5 accounting job was just the beginning. From 7 p.m. to 1 a.m., I stocked shelves at a fluorescent-lit supermarket, my body aching from the physical labor after a day of sitting. On weekends, I didn't rest. I took on freelance data entry work, my eyes burning from staring at a screen for 16 hours straight on Saturday and Sunday. I slept 4, maybe 5 hours a night if I was lucky. My diet consisted of instant noodles, rice, and occasionally a discounted bento box. I was always tired and always hungry. Friendships withered and died. I had no time, no money, and no energy to see anyone. When old friends called, I made excuses until they stopped calling. I became a ghost, a machine whose only purpose was to generate money to pour into the black hole Kenji had created. There were dark days when the hopelessness was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I would sit in my tiny, damp room and stare at the wall, wondering if this was all my life would ever be. But in that darkness, something else began to grow. Beneath the exhaustion and despair, a cold, hard kernel of rage started to form. It wasn't loud or explosive. It was a quiet, meticulous fury. Every time I ate a meal of plain rice, I thought of the fancy dinners Kenji was probably enjoying. Every time my back screamed in protest from lifting another box, I pictured him sleeping soundly in a comfortable bed. Every payment confirmation I received from the bank wasn't a symbol of my burden, but a receipt for the injustice I had suffered. The rage became my fuel. It burned away the depression and left a sharp, clear purpose in its place. I would survive this. I would pay back every last yen, and then I would find him. Years passed in that relentless grind, 3 of them. I was a shell of a person, gaunt and pale, but the loan balance was shrinking. I had paid off more than half of it through sheer brute force labor. The rage was my constant companion, my shield against despair. It was during this period that my life took an unexpected turn. It happened at my primary accounting firm. I often stayed late, not just to finish my own work, but because the quiet office was a better place to do my freelance data entry than my miserable little room. It was nearly 11 p.m. on a Tuesday when the founder of one of our largest client companies, a shrewd, older man named Mr. Sato, came into the office to retrieve a briefcase he had forgotten. He was surprised to see me there, a lone figure under the glow of a desk lamp in the otherwise dark office. "Working late, son?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Just finishing up a few things, sir," I lied, quickly closing the spreadsheet for my side gig. He wasn't fooled. He had a reputation for being incredibly perceptive. He looked at my worn-out suit, the exhaustion etched onto my face, and the ferocious intensity with which I'd been working. He didn't press me for details about my personal life. Instead, he said, "I've reviewed the financial analyses you prepare for my company. They are the most thorough and error-free documents I have ever received. You have an exceptional eye for detail, Tanaka-san." He simply nodded, retrieved his briefcase, and left. A week later, his personal assistant called me. Mr. Sato wanted to have lunch with me. I was stunned. At a quiet, private restaurant, he laid it out plainly. "I don't know what your situation is, and it's not my business," he began. "But I know talent and I know dedication when I see it. People with your kind of focus are rare. I am expanding my company's internal finance department, and I want you to be a part of it. I'm offering you a position as a financial strategist. The pay is double what you make now, with significant performance bonuses. I was speechless. It was a lifeline. It was more than a lifeline. It was a ladder out of the pit. I accepted on the spot, my voice thick with an emotion I hadn't felt in years. Gratitude. The new job was demanding, but it was fulfilling. For the first time, my hard work was building something, not just filling a hole. With the increased salary, I could finally stop working my third job on weekends. A year later, I quit the night job at the supermarket. 2 years after starting with Mr. Sato, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I made the final payment on Kenji's loan. The balance was zero. I was free. But I was not finished. The moment the bank confirmed the final payment, I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound, unnerving silence. The roaring engine of debt and survival that had driven me for 5 relentless years had suddenly switched off. I was standing in the quiet aftermath, financially free, but still emotionally shackled to the injustice. The rage hadn't vanished with the debt. It had simply lost its immediate purpose. It was now a cold, polished stone I carried inside me. I was free, but I wasn't whole. With the debt gone, the ferocious energy I had used to work 3 jobs had nowhere to go. So I poured all of it into my career. I became Mr. Sato's shadow, arriving before him and leaving after him. The same obsessive focus I had applied to paying off Kenji's loan, I now applied to market analysis, investment strategies, and corporate growth. Mr. Sato saw this and nurtured it. He promoted me again and again. I went from financial strategist to head of the department, and finally to his chief operating officer. The boy who lived on instant noodles was now managing a portfolio worth hundreds of millions. The trappings of success followed. I bought a minimalist, high-tech apartment with a panoramic view of the city skyline, the very antithesis of the damp, cramped room of my past. I dressed in tailored suits that fit perfectly, a quiet armor for the man I had become. My life was rebuilt, stronger and more prosperous than I could have ever imagined. After 6 years of meteoric success under Mr. Sato's wing, and with his encouragement to become my own man, I took the final step. I launched my own boutique financial consulting firm. I was no longer Akio Tanaka the victim, or Akio Tanaka the employee. I was president and CEO Akio Tanaka. Throughout all this time, I made a conscious choice not to think about my family. I had blocked my parents' numbers years ago after a few pathetic, half-hearted attempts on their part to see if I was managing. I never searched for Kenji. The past was a sealed room, and I was afraid of what would happen if I opened the door. I had everything I could want, but I knew, deep down, that the story wasn't over. Justice had not been served. The stone of rage I carried was patient. I had no idea that a random click on a society blog one Tuesday morning was about to provide the spark that would finally make it burn. White hot. It was a Tuesday morning, just over 5 years since I'd made that final loan payment. I was in my corner office, sipping my first coffee of the day and casually scrolling through a financial news blog, keeping up with market gossip. An article about a recent high society charity gala caught my eye, mostly because the CEO featured a man named Ichiro Yoshida of Yoshida Logistics, was someone my firm was considering approaching. I clicked on the photo gallery. The first picture showed Mr. Yoshida with his arm around his smiling daughter, and standing next to the daughter, with his hand possessively on her waist, was a man whose face stopped my heart. He looked different, of course. Older, more polished, with an expensive haircut and a bespoke suit that screamed wealth. But the arrogant tilt of his head was the same. The self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips was the same. It was Kenji. I felt the blood drain from my face. My coffee cup trembled in my hand. I scrolled down to the caption below the photo. CEO Ichiro Yoshida, with his daughter Hana and her fiancé, the brilliant up-and-coming tech entrepreneur, Kai Ito. Kai Ito. He had changed his name. He had taken my money, the money I bled for, and used it to erase his past and invent a new one. He hadn't just survived. He had thrived. He had laundered his identity and was now about to marry into one of the country's most respected and powerful families. The cold, dormant stone of rage inside me didn't just rekindle. It exploded into a white-hot nova. Every night I had spent shivering in that tiny room, every meal of instant noodles, every hour of soul-crushing labor. It all rushed back to me in a single tidal wave of fury. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it. He was living a life of luxury built directly on top of the years of misery he had inflicted on me. He wasn't just a thief. He was a parasite who had attached himself to a new host. The quiet emptiness I had felt for years was suddenly filled with a chilling, absolute clarity. I knew exactly what I had to do. This wasn't about the money anymore. This was about principle. This was about truth. I swiveled in my chair, my movements calm and deliberate. I picked up my phone and dialed the number of the top corporate investigator in the city, a man known for his discretion and his ruthlessness. He answered on the second ring. "This is Akio Tanaka," I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. "I have a job for you. I'm sending you a photograph of a man named Kai Ito. I want to know everything about him. Where he's lived for the past 5 years, every yen he's spent, every lie he's told. I want a complete blueprint of the life he has built. Spare no expense." The hunt had officially begun. The investigator was worth every yen. 10 days later, a thick, nondescript manila envelope was delivered to my office by a courier. Inside was a detailed report that laid out my brother's 5-year deception with chilling precision. I read it from cover to cover, and with every page, the ice in my veins spread. Kenji had been methodical. The report showed that immediately after securing the loan, he had used a small portion of the money to pay a shadowy online firm to create a portfolio of fake investments and a fabricated history of a successful business he had supposedly sold. He then legally changed his name to Kai Ito, severing all ties to the Tanaka family. With his new identity and a fraudulent backstory, he moved to the capital. There, he began his performance. He used the bulk of my money, the money I earned through sweat and starvation, to rent a luxury condo, lease a German sports car, and fill his wardrobe with designer clothes. He lived the life of a wealthy heir, carefully attending the right charity events, art gallery openings, and exclusive clubs. He was selling a product, and the product was himself. His entire existence was a lie, funded by my suffering. The report detailed how he met Hana Yoshida at a polo match, charming her with his fake stories of old money and entrepreneurial genius. The most damning section was about his current business. The investigator found that Kenji's celebrated tech startup, Ito Innovations, was nothing more than a shell corporation with a fancy website. It had no employees, no products, and no intellectual property. Its only asset was the significant seed money Mr. Yoshida had already invested in his future son-in-law's vision. Kenji was not just a liar. He was actively defrauding the Yoshida family. Then, the investigator provided the final, critical piece of intelligence. A deep dive into Mr. Yoshida revealed that the self-made CEO was a man obsessed with honor and integrity. He despised shortcuts and liars, having built his own empire from nothing. He valued a person's background and character above all else. This was Kenji's fatal error. He had conned a man whose entire moral code was built against people exactly like him. The report concluded with the date for the official engagement party. In 3 weeks, at the Grand Imperial Hotel ballroom. It was to be the social event of the season. Reading this, my plans solidified, not in a storm of emotion, but with the cold, calculated precision of a financial takeover. I wasn't going to send an anonymous letter or arrange a private meeting. That would be too merciful. I would allow him to climb to the very peak of his fraudulent mountain, and then, in front of everyone, I would kick him off the summit. I began preparing my own presentation, a slideshow of truth to counter his lifetime of lies. On the night of the engagement party, I felt no nerves, only a profound and chilling sense of purpose. I dressed in my finest suit, a dark charcoal wool that was custom-tailored and radiated quiet authority. I was no longer the gaunt, haunted boy from the boarding house. I was a CEO, and I looked the part. I didn't sneak into the Grand Imperial Hotel. I walked through the front entrance, my head held high. And when a security guard at the ballroom door asked for my invitation, I simply looked him in the eye and said, "I'm a guest of the groom's family," with an assurance that made him step aside without a second thought. I found a position at the back of the magnificent, crystal-draped ballroom, and I watched. My eyes scanned the crowd, and, to my grim satisfaction, I saw them. My parents. They were seated at a table of honor near the front, looking utterly delighted. My mother was wearing a new dress, looking prouder than I had ever seen her. The investigator's report had mentioned that Kenji had reconnected with them a year ago, once his engagement to Hana was secure. They had become accomplices in his fraud, happily enjoying the fruits of his deception, while knowing full well I had been left to rot. Their presence here sealed their fate alongside his. I watched as Kenji, my brother, the man now known as Kai Ito, basked in the spotlight. He was a master performer, laughing with Mr. Yoshida, whispering loving words to Hana, accepting congratulations with a humble-looking bow. Then came the speeches. Hana's mother said a few tearful words. Then Kenji gave a short, charming speech about how lucky he was. Finally, Mr. Yoshida himself took the microphone, his voice booming with pride. "In business and in life," he began, "I value one thing above all others: character. A person's background, their integrity, their honor. That is the true measure of a man." My lips curled into a faint smile. He was making my job too easy. And I have seen that character in Kai Ito. I am proud to welcome a man of such unimpeachable integrity into my family. The room burst into thunderous applause. Waiters began to move to pour the celebratory toast. This was the moment. This was the peak of the mountain. As the applause began to fade, I started my walk. I moved from the back of the room, my footsteps steady and measured on the marble floor. A few heads turned, then a few more. A ripple of silence began to spread as people noticed the determined stranger purposefully approaching the stage. I saw Kenji's eyes find me. His smile froze. The color drained from his face as a look of pure animal panic replaced his confident facade. My parents saw me next. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. I reached the stage, took the microphone from a stunned Mr. Yoshida, and turned to face the silent, watchful crowd. I looked directly at my brother. "Excuse me," I said, my voice calm and clear, amplified throughout the vast hall. "There's been a slight mistake. My name," I announced, my voice echoing in the dead silent room, "is Akio Tanaka, and the man you all know as Kai Ito is my older brother, Kenji Tanaka." A collective gasp went through the crowd. I saw Hana's confused face look from me to Kenji, whose expression was one of pure, abject terror. Mr. Yoshida's brow furrowed in anger and confusion. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. "Before you say anything," I said, my gaze sweeping across the room, "I believe a visual aid is in order. My brother was always fond of business presentations." With a discreet nod, a technician I had hired for the evening brought my presentation to life on the giant screen behind me, replacing the romantic photos of the happy couple. The first slide appeared. On one side was a picture of Kenji and me as teenagers, awkward and smiling. On the other was a high-resolution scan of his old official ID with the name Kenji Tanaka clearly visible. "This is who my brother truly is," I explained calmly, "not some prodigy from a wealthy family, but Kenji Tanaka from a very modest background. As our parents, who are sitting right there at table 3, can surely confirm." Hundreds of heads swiveled to stare at my parents. My father looked like he was having a heart attack, and my mother seemed to be trying to shrink into her chair. Click. The next slide showed the $50,000 loan agreement. His signature and mine were circled in red. 5 years ago, Kenji here had a brilliant business idea, but with his poor credit, no bank would lend him a yen. So he and my parents spent a week pressuring me, his younger brother, a junior accountant, to sign my life away as his guarantor. Against my better judgment, I did. Because that's what family is supposed to do, right? Help each other. Click. The screen was now a collage of my nightmare. The default notices from the bank. A photo of the squalid, moldy room I was forced to live in. Scans of my pay stubs from my 3 separate jobs. Proof of the 80-hour work weeks. The final image was a candid photo the investigator had found, taken of me on a rare break outside the supermarket where I worked nights. I was gaunt, hollow-eyed, a ghost. 1 month after the money was in his account, Kenji vanished, I narrated, my voice flat and cold. He left me with the entire debt. For the next 5 years, while I worked myself to the bone, living on next to nothing to clean up his mess, he was using that very money to build this performance. He was buying the suits, leasing the car, and paying for the club memberships that allowed him to meet all of you. I turned my back to the screen and faced Mr. Yoshida directly. His face was a mask of thunderous rage. "Mr. Yoshida, you spoke of character. This man has none. The startup you invested in is a fiction. The man your daughter is engaged to is a fraud. He is a con artist who built his kingdom on the ruins of my life." For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the projector. Then, the ballroom erupted. It wasn't shouting, but a massive, shocked wave of whispers and murmurs. Phones were out. People were pointing at the screen, then at Kenji, then at my parents, who were frozen like statues in a tragedy. Kenji finally found his voice, but it was shrill and panicked. "He's lying. It's all lies. I've never seen this man before in my life. He's insane!" he shrieked, looking wildly around for support. But the evidence was still glowing on the screen behind him. The loan document, my haggard face, his old ID. His denials were pathetic, transparent. Hana stared at him, her face a canvas of utter devastation. The love in her eyes was replaced by dawning horror and disgust. "Kenji, is it true?" she whispered, her voice breaking. She took a step back from him, then another, as if he were suddenly contagious. But it was Mr. Yoshida who truly exploded. His face had gone from crimson with rage to a deathly white. The public humiliation was a wound far deeper than any financial loss. He turned on Kenji, his voice a low, guttural roar that cut through the entire ballroom. "You, parasite," he seethed. "You came into my home. You stood next to my daughter. You ate at my table. And it was all a lie." He stabbed a finger towards Kenji. "A man of integrity? You don't know the meaning of the word." Seeing his entire world disintegrate, Kenji snapped. The last vestige of his composure vanished, and a primal rage took over. With a wild scream, he lunged, not at Mr. Yoshida, but at me. You ruined everything," he bellowed, his hands clawing like talons. He never reached me. Before he could take 2 steps, 2 burly hotel security guards, responding to a sharp gesture from Mr. Yoshida, tackled him. They pinned him to the floor as he thrashed and cursed, his expensive suit tearing at the seams. The con artist was gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered animal. Amid the chaos, I saw my parents trying to slink away towards an exit, but it was useless. Every eye was on their family's spectacular implosion. They were as much a part of the spectacle as Kenji. Their shame was absolute. My work was done. I placed the microphone carefully back on its stand. I gave one last long look at my brother struggling on the floor, at my parents cowering in shame, and at the smoldering ruins of the life he had stolen to build. Then, I turned my back on it all. I walked off the stage and headed for the exit, my steps never faltering. As the ballroom doors swished shut behind me, the last thing I heard was Mr. Yoshida screaming at the guards, "Get that filth out of my sight, now!" The story of the disastrous engagement party became the talk of the city's financial circles. It was too spectacular, too dramatic to remain private. Articles appeared online with headlines like, "Tech, Prince or Pauper, CEO's fiancé exposed as fraud in ballroom showdown." My name was mentioned, but I declined every request for an interview. I had said everything I needed to say on that stage. I had no interest in becoming a media personality. My goal was justice, not fame. Mr. Yoshida, true to his reputation, was merciless. He sued Kenji for every yen he had invested, and his lawyers buried my brother in litigation he could never hope to fight. But the legal action was secondary. Mr. Yoshida's true revenge was social and professional annihilation. He made a few calls, and Kenji, both as Kai Ito and Kenji Tanaka, became radioactive. He was blacklisted from every industry, a walking symbol of deceit. The last I heard, from a final follow-up note from my investigator, was that Kenji was working as a dishwasher in a dingy restaurant on the outskirts of the city, deep in debt and forever marked by his public disgrace. He had not only lost the life he had faked, but he had also been forced into a life of struggle, far worse than the one he had imposed on me. My parents faced their own quiet ruin. In their small community, the shame was unbearable. Their golden son was a convicted fraud, and they were his willing accomplices. They tried to contact me several times. The first few messages were filled with rage, accusing me of destroying the family. When I didn't respond, the tone changed to pathetic pleading. The last message I ever received was from my mother. It read, "Akio, we are so sorry. We always knew you were the strong one. We are so proud of the man you have become." I read the words, felt nothing at all, and deleted the message. Then I blocked her number for the final time. They were ghosts to me now. I don't feel joy when I think about what happened. The revenge didn't make me happy. It made me free. It wasn't an act of passion, but an act of accounting. It was the final necessary entry to close a ledger that had been unbalanced for far too long. The cold, heavy stone of rage I had carried for a decade was simply gone. In its place, there was only a quiet peace. By forcing the truth into the light, I had not just destroyed Kenji's lies, but I had also reclaimed my own narrative. I was no longer the scapegoat, the victim, or the forgotten son. I was the man who had survived, who had rebuilt, and who had taken back his own life. My worth was never defined by them. It was forged in the fire they had thrown me into. Now, looking out of my office window at the city skyline, I don't see the shadows of the past. I only see the future, a future I built myself.